All right, so 4 trucks, right? And clean air. Like not two things you'd normally put together.
Yeah, not really.
But that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. We're going to be looking at how Ford, their hybrid transit vans specifically,
Right.
are being used in this, honestly, really clever way to try and help improve air quality in cities.
Yeah,
And I think for you, with your interest in, cutting edge technology and all that,
for sure.
this is going to be right up your street.
Oh yeah, this is a great example, and I think it speaks to that bigger trend we're seeing, right? Like moving towards
Yeah.
more sustainable cities and how tech can actually play a role in that.
Totally.
Yeah.
So these Ford Transit vans, we're not talking like, the family tractor you pile everyone into for a road trip.
Right.
These are like work vehicles, delivery fleets, the kind of things that are operating in really busy urban environments where, let's be honest, air quality can be a bit of a nightmare.
Exactly. Yeah. And these vans are actually, they're called PHEVs, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles,
Mhm.
which means they can switch between, gas and electric power, which that's a key detail here.
Okay, yeah. Keep that in mind, that PHEV bit, that's going to come back in a big way. But first, let's talk about this study that Ford did. This was a big project, right?
Oh, absolutely. This was not just some small little pilot program. They went all in on this. It was a 3-year study, over 400,000 kilometers of driving data, and they had these transit vans operating in London,
Wow.
Cologne, and Valencia.
Okay, geographically diverse then as well.
Absolutely. Wanted to get a good spread.
Yeah. And this is where it gets even more interesting for me because they partnered up with a company called Tomorrow.io.
Right.
Now, you might have heard of them. They do weather forecasting, but they do a whole bunch of other stuff, right?
Yeah, they do. They do a lot more than just tell you if you need an umbrella.
Exactly.
And in this case, they were providing Ford with real-time air quality data.
Okay.
So you can almost think of it like having a pollution sensor on
Yeah.
every street corner, just constantly monitoring the air.
That's like that in itself
Oh, it's incredible.
is pretty wild. But then they're driving these vans around.
Yeah.
They're collecting all this data on air quality. What are they actually doing with it?
Right.
That's where I think this whole dynamic geofencing thing comes in.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I don't even know if I fully understand what that means.
Yeah, so essentially what they did is they created these virtual zones within the cities, right? So you've got your city, you've got your map,
Okay.
and then they've overlaid these zones on top.
Right.
And when the van enters a zone with particularly bad air quality, or maybe it's a designated low emission zone,
Yeah.
the vehicle system will actually automatically switch over to electric power.
So it's like the van knows, uh-oh, I'm getting into a sensitive area here. I need to clean up my act.
Exactly. It's like time to run clean for a bit.
That's so clever.
It's really smart.
But how effective was this in practice?
Well, that's the thing. The results were really impressive. They found that these vans actually drove almost half of their total distance purely on electric power.
Wow, that's significant.
It's huge, yeah.
Especially because, we're not talking about like a little electric car just popping about. These are commercial vehicles in city centers. Like, that's got to have an impact on emissions.
Oh, yeah. It really does. And I think what's so cool about this is that, it's not just about reducing emissions overall. It's about doing it in a very targeted way, right? Like actually making a difference where it matters most.
Yeah.
Whether that's those low emission zones we talked about,
Right.
or areas where the air quality is particularly bad. It's about being smart with it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because instead of just being like all electric all the time, which, in a commercial setting, that's not always practical.
Right, exactly.
This is like, okay, let's be strategic. Let's use that electric power when and where it's going to have the biggest impact.
Yeah, I think that's the key.
And that, to me at least, feels like a much more realistic approach if we're ever going to see this kind of thing, adopted more widely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be scalable.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where I think it starts to get really interesting from I don't know, almost like an urban planning perspective.
Right. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Because you start to think about, okay, if we can do this with emissions,
Right.
what else can we do with this kind of technology?
Exactly. Like imagine a city, right, where these geofence zones aren't just about emissions.
Right.
Maybe they're used to manage traffic flow or give priority to electric vehicles in certain areas, or even adjust pricing
Okay.
for things like parking or tolls based on what's happening with the environment in real time.
So it's like the city itself is kind of becoming more intelligent and more responsive, I guess, in a way.
More adaptable.
Yeah, to how it's impacting the environment.
Yeah.
That's really cool. But okay, we got to talk about this whole blockchain thing for a second.
Right.
Because I'll be honest,
It's a bit of a buzzword, isn't it?
it is, and I'm still a little bit fuzzy on like
Yeah.
how it all fits in here.
Okay, so basically they were looking at how, in the context of this Ford study, right,
Yeah.
how blockchain could be used to kind of track those emissions, but in a way that's really transparent and
Yeah.
verifiable.
So it's not just like, oh, Ford's telling us that they drove half the distance on electric. Like, there's a way to actually back that up.
Exactly. It's like a digital ledger, right? So every time that van switches to electric mode, that data point gets recorded.
Gotcha.
And because it's all decentralized, no one can mess with it.
And that's the key with blockchain, right?
Exactly.
Because it's not like one person controlling everything.
It's out there.
It's out there, yeah. And it's all,
Secure.
secure, tamper-proof, all of that good stuff.
Exactly.
So for you and me, maybe that doesn't seem like a huge deal, but if you're a city
Right.
trying to meet these emissions targets, or a company trying to, get credit for being sustainable,
Oh, it's huge for them.
that is really valuable information to have.
Absolutely. Imagine a program where companies can actually earn rewards
Oh?
based on those verified emission reductions, right? It's not just about being punished for polluting anymore.
It's about being rewarded for doing the right thing.
Exactly. That's when real change happens.
Now we're talking.
And I think, you start to connect all these things. We've got the hybrid vehicles, we've got the real-time data, we've got this transparency that blockchain can bring.
It's like suddenly the future's looking pretty good.
Yeah. And it's like suddenly we've got all these new ways to make cities smarter and more sustainable.
This is actually, it's making me think about all of this in a totally different way.
Yeah.
It's like, it's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by the whole climate thing,
It's so big.
It feels massive, but then you see this kind of innovation,
Yeah, it's all...
It gives you that little glimmer of, okay, maybe we can figure this out.
Absolutely.
If we're smart about it and we use technology the right way, like
Who can make a difference?
this could be huge.
Yeah. We really can. And I think what's so important to remember is that it's not just about, these big companies or governments. It's about, all of us making different choices in our own lives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a really good point. It's funny you should say that because I was just thinking, it's easy to get so caught up in the technology of it all.
Oh, totally.
That we forget, we all have a part to play as individuals as well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But while we're still on the tech side of things,
yeah.
I'm curious, like, what else is out there? What's got you really excited when you think about the future of, transportation, cities, all of that?
Well, one of the things that I think is really fascinating right now is how AI is starting to be used in all of this.
Right.
And we see it in this small way with the geofencing, but you can imagine that on a much, much grander scale, right?
So, okay, paint me a picture. What does a city with like AI at its heart even look like?
I mean, think about a city where like traffic just flows.
Okay.
Not by accident, but because there's, AI monitoring everything, adjusting traffic signals in real time.
Right.
Public transportation is a breeze because it's all, perfectly integrated and personalized, even
Right.
air quality, right?
Yeah.
Managed at like a hyper local level because we've got sensors and systems all working together. That's the dream, right?
It sounds incredible, I have to say.
It's pretty wild when you think about it.
But how realistic is that? Like, are we talking sci-fi here, or is this something that we could actually see, in our lifetimes?
I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, right? Let's be real.
Right.
But we're seeing the pieces coming together, right?
Yeah.
And the technology is advancing so rapidly. I think that's what's really exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The pace of change is mind-blowing.
It's incredible.
So I guess for our listener out there who's probably, their head's probably buzzing a little bit with all of this, mine is, what's the key takeaway? What do we want them to remember from this deep dive today?
I think the most important thing to remember is that, the future isn't something that just happens to us.
Yeah.
We have the power to shape it. And whether that's through the choices we make, the technology that we embrace, what we're asking of our leaders, it all plays a role. And I think this Ford study it's a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
It shows what's possible when we start to really bring together that innovation, that desire for sustainability, the commitment to actually building a better future. That's what it's all about.
I couldn't agree more. And on that note, this has been a fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today and share all of this. It's really got me thinking.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Always happy to geek out about this stuff.
And to our listener, Keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and keep pushing for that brighter future. We'll catch you on our next deep dive.